the worse the payback's gonna be.
The tree that doesn't bend breaks.
You've been too far. You're already broken.
Welcome to this very special edition of the Real Deal podcast. I'm your host, Surreal Gerald Quinn. As we record this on a Sunday, hope everybody out there is enjoyed their weekend. Before I told you a few weeks back when we did our back to school special, the Wire episode final grades, that possibly another one was coming. And a couple weeks later, the week after this episode came out, I decided to do a look at the series finale, and that's what we're going to do this evening. The Wire 30. This is, of course, the series finale of the series. It was recorded March 8th. Not recorded, excuse me. It was this episode aired March 8th, 2008. 93 minutes long, or 93, 94 minutes, give or take a minute. It was the series' longest episode, and frankly, one of the best series finales in the history of television. Like, it really is. I watched it this morning, and I'm gonna tell you right now, it did not feel like the episode was 93 minutes. It moved so fast, and it takes you back to. Took me back to when it was that last episode, and you're just like, all right, it gotta be some more left. It gotta be some more left, that you just don't want the series or want the episode or the series to end. It was a phenomenal episode, to say the least. Vulture had it, and Vulture did an excellent job at ranking all the Wire episodes, all 60 of the Wire episodes. And again, you're not going to agree with every single ranking. It's 60 episodes of television, but for the most part, I thought Vulture did an excellent job with this ranking. They had this episode ranked number 3, only Middle Ground, which universally is regarded as the greatest Wire episode ever, and final grades from season 4 are ranked ahead of it. We're going to talk more about the season 5 legacy, because I think season 5 gets a bad rap. And when you look through some of these rankings on Vulture, season 5 is prominent in the top half of some of these rankings, to be honest with you, some of these episodes. So we're going to look back at that. We're going to talk about that later on in the program. But before, as always, I'm going to get into themes of this episode. And frankly, the theme that stood out to me the most was comeuppance. We saw the comeuppance of a few of our characters. These 3 were the most prominent of these characters. When you look at what happened with McNulty, Freeman, and also Cheese Blackstaff, we'll talk about that over the course of the episode. So our theme for this episode is comeuppance. Let's go to the deep dive. Marlo Stanfield. So we see what happens with Marlo, how his story ends. And first of all, performance by the actor Jamie Hector cannot be. It is it's a performance that has aged so well, and in the moment, you just had no idea. You couldn't respect the performance in the moment. Like, when this came out, I'm like, what, 25, 26 at the time. The series ended when I was 30. When Jamie Hector first comes on, when Marlo first comes on in season 3, remember, we dealt basically with 3 seasons of Avon Barksdale. Avon Barksdale is probably, as I would say, outside of Omar, my second favorite character in the whole series. In the entire Wire run, I would say, yeah, Avon Barksdale is probably my second favorite character. Charismatic. He has, Avon had a personality. Avon had a sense of humanity. He, cared about family. Most people love Avon, the character Avon Barksdale. So you come in with Jamie Hector's character, with Marlo Stanfield, played by Jamie Hector. And by the way, those 2 have been in a number of movies together. I don't know if people realize that Jamie Hector and Wood Harris have been in about at least 6 movies, 5 to 6 movies together. Like, if you go check the IMDb, they played a lot of they've been in a lot of the same stuff over the course of their careers, mostly small and independent, but regardless, so I found that very interesting. But Marlo, this guy comes in, not much of a personality, doesn't say too many words, but it was all that was really how he was supposed to play the character. He was supposed to be a guy who thinks fast, was efficient with his words, efficient with his actions, and was the new breed. The new breed. He was like Avon 3.0 in essence, as far as like how ruthless he was. Like that character, this character is like he is as cold as ice. Like it's bad. And Avon did some shit. And Avon was crazy. Avon would kill you in a heartbeat. But Jamie Actor's character had no this character had no remorse whatsoever. The most remorseful moment he had in the entire series, probably if you want to call it that, was the killing, the most humane moment. I ain't gonna say even remorse. That's a bad term. The most human moment he had was involved killing somebody. It was killing, having Michael's father killed. That was him being uh quote unquote a good guy in his world, and even that came with the fact that, hey, I'm gonna kill your father, but when I do this, you belong to us. So that came with a price. Like he's not doing shit like letting Cuddy walk out the game. Like no, that's not that's not what Marlo was about. And you look at the performance that took it over the top was his performance in the episode when he says, "My name is my name." When it's kind of like 3 years of a build up to where he's so reserved, so calm, so cool. He finally snaps because all he cared about. He cared about number one was his reputation. It was about, yes, wearing the crown. And sure, he loved money, and sure, he loved power, but he cared the most important thing to Marlo was his street. It was his reputation, and he delivers a just virtuoso performance in that particular scene when they're in the jail, and he snaps on Chris and he snaps on Monk about not telling him that Omar was basically destroying his reputation and basically calling him out in the street. They hid that. Well, and there's a reason why Chris hid that, because he knew Marlo would probably try to go after Omar, and Omar would kill him. So this character, again, if we're ranking television villains in the last 20 years, he is without question up there. Like there's no two ways. He's probably top five television villain. The intelligence, the just ruthlessness, and just, I mean, this again, he plays this role perfectly. He is the anti Avon Barksdale from a stance of personality from that standpoint. Um, you look at him in this particular episode, so and now I can probably I'll talk about his last scene and keep that off the best scenes, but he, in essence, the reason why I got this picture next to him with Stringer Bell, at the end of this episode, he gets everything that Stringer wanted. Okay, he was able to walk away with $10 million. He sells the Connect. He's because of the police and all their dirt and what they did, those illegal wiretaps. And we'll talk about this during the best scenes with Perlman and Levy. Marlo is able to walk away with $10 million. He's in a meeting. He goes to a business meeting where he's in a suit with Levy, and Levy's introducing him to all these big time real estate brokers and politicians. This is what Stringer Bell wanted. This is what Stringer Bell in his fantasy body, and Stringer Bell, who's probably in hell somewhere, saying, why couldn't this be me? And Marlo it's just not and again, it was perfectly written. This is just not who Marlo is. Marlo is not a businessman from that standpoint. He's not a guy, he's not a suit and tie. He walks out the meeting, says he has to use the bathroom, walks out and goes back straight to the street. And you see him go straight to the street, and you see him, knock out one of the kids gets, stabbed, not stabbed, but gets sliced on his wrist, and licks his blood, and he says, like, yeah, this is where I belong. And that's where that's where the character Marlo Stanfield belonged, on the street corner. And that's why I say that probably if there were a season 6 that the Marlo can't, that there's no way the Marlo Stanfield character would not have gone back to the street and probably ended up probably ended up dead. He probably would have ended up went back to the street and got back in the game or got arrested because, of course, we know that if we know that any whiff of him that was going to be on the street, they were going to pull that file, even if it meant throwing cops in jail, and they were going to put him in jail. But my main thing about the Marlo character is that Jamie is just how perfectly played this character was by Jamie Hector, and how I have like as like 15, 16 years later, I have way more respect and way more regard for this character than I did in the moment. And this character was a guy that just was about his business and was about just strictly about his reputation of a street figure. That's what he was about. He was about just his reputation. All he cared about was his name. And if you notice in that final scene, the kids, the new generation, remember, he's had to give up the crown. He's done right now. He's no longer the kingpin. They don't even know who he is. They're talking about Omar. Omar's name is the one that rings out. So Omar, even in death, Omar's name is what it rings out, and is what the new generation is talking about, not Marlo Stansfield. They literally didn't know who he was. He says, "Do you know who I am?" And the guy says, "Do you know who I am?" So he did not. So and that was the tragedy of that particular character, that he lost everything. He lost what he valued the most, and that was his name, his street name, and his reputation on the street. But again, phenomenal performance by Jamie Hector. He was in he's been in a number of things over the past. I mean, he's been around for a long time. Remember, he had a basically a bit role in He Got Game back then. If you remember that, one of Spike Lee's montages where he actually had braids, and I mean, you could barely. It's only like for like maybe like 10, 15 seconds, and this is like in '98. So he's been around for a while. He if you he was in We Own the City last year on HBO, which again he was great. He was great in that. Had a pretty big role in that. So again, perfectly cast actor, one of the great television villains of all time. That is the deep dive, and again, he got everything that Stringer had and did not want it. Didn't want it, and vice versa. Stringer didn't care about street reputation. So when Stringer was with Avon, he didn't care about being a top dog as far as Kingpin. He didn't care about that. So there you go with that. That is our deep dive of this episode.
A true murder police. Yep. Jimmy, I say this seriously. If I was laying there dead on some Baltimore street corner, I'd want it to be you, standing over me, catching the case. Bullshit! Because, brother, when you were good, you were the best we had.
Best scenes, there are a number of them, of course, as you would expect in the series finale. I even probably left a couple off that could have made the cut. Prez and Duquan. So this is kind of like a two-part scene. So Duquan is completely out as far as he's in the street. He's a crackhead. He is developing. He is at this point. He is Bubbles at this point. He looks, matter of fact, he looks like probably with a younger version of what a 18-year-old Bubbles would look like, or not, how old he is. Probably at the time, he's probably 18, 19 at the time. I want to say probably 18. He's Bubbles at this point, and he goes back up to the school. And it's to the point where he tries to knocks on the door while during the school day, and Marsha Donnelly, the assistant principal, barely doesn't even recognize him. She tells him that basically you have to wait outside. I'll get Mr. Prez. Prez, this is like a year later following the season 4. Of course, Prez has a beard. Prez is fully in control of his classroom and got the handle of the job. He asked Duquan, Dookie asked him for some money, says he's going to enroll in the GED program and get a place. So he's going to enroll in a GED program and also get a place. So like $150. And the sad part about this scene is they both know that this is bullshit. Prez know that this is bullshit. Duquan know that, of course, he's spewing bullshit out of his mind, out of his mouth. But Prez had a deep connection with the kids, especially Duquan. He, if you remember season 4, he would feed Duquan, he would clothe Duquan, and Prez ends up giving him the money, ends up giving him $200. And again, Prez says, hey, the entire time Prez was going to give them there was no question that he was going to give him the money. But what he said to him is, look, I'm going to go down there to the Baltimore Community College place, place where you get a GED, and if your name is registered down there, then I'm gonna know I have a friend. I'm gonna know that I can trust Duquan, and so on and so on. He's trying to basically, in essence, to me, guilt him into telling the truth. He says, if you're not registered down there, then I'm gonna know. Then chances are I'm probably not gonna see you ever again. Again, Perez was a former cop. He knows that. Listen, he used to deal with bubbles. He knows that look. He knows what it looks like he knows what a crackhead looks like. But he has such a soft spot for this young man who was, he watched in middle school, and now he's seeing him and watched him go through so much shit with his family and the foster homes and just everything that he dealt with over the course of his duration on the over the course of the time that he'd known him, that he was going to give him the money regardless. So he gives him the money, $200, and of course he's never going to see Duquan ever again. Like, Duquan is taking that $200 is going right into his arm, along with his friends, his new friend that he hangs with. Of course, the guys that deal with the horses. We know what happened prior in season 4 with those guys that he found his tribe, and those guys are crackheads in essence. He's found work, and he's also found himself. He's also became the new Bubbles from that standpoint. So very sad scene. We remember the connection that these two had in season 4. And Fred, again, there was a point where during season 4 where Duquan actually looked clean, and he actually, like I said, he was being basically taken care of by Prez. But now he's out to school, he's in the street, and Prez, looks as if, like, once he gives that final look as he watches Duquan walk away, and Prez knows that he is never going to see him again. McNulty, Ross, Daniels. This scene was hilarious because just understanding at this point, everybody knows the truth has come out about McNulty and Freeman with the serial killers. Everybody knows. Of course, we know Kima told on both of them. She told Daniels, and now we're in, basically they're trying to find this killer, this copycat killer, and they're trying to find this copycat killer, and also the mayor's office is trying to do its best job to kind of like protect themselves from the onslaught that's going to be coming from the governor, and also be coming from the media. They're in pure, crisis management mode. Everybody's in crisis management mode in terms of protecting their positions. Daniel's trying to protect Perlman, and so on and so on. So they have McNulty in the box at the police station. Now, again, this only made perfect sense that it would be these two that would confront McNulty. Remember, understand the history of this show. McNulty started out at the Western with Rawls. He in essence left Rawls to go with Daniels, and they create a unit, the Major Crimes Unit, which Daniel presided over for a couple of years. So McNulty has a lot of history with both of these guys. At various points of the series, he pissed off both of these guys to no end, and they absolutely, lay into McNulty about this serial killer. Rawls had a funny line, says, "You're not killing him yourself, are you, Jimmy?" And that was a hilarious line from Rawls. And then they basically tell him, like, look, you need to put down this last case in terms of this copycat killer. That's going to be your final case as regular police. After that, you're basically done. Even if you're not fired, which we all know they ended up not getting fired. They just were never going to do any real police work. And we saw what happened with Freeman, and also with McNulty. So this scene, you have two of his former bosses coming at McNulty. again, everybody was on point as far as performance. Like I said, we'll talk more about Dominic West's performance. He was phenomenal in this episode. Even during this scene, you can see the amount of guilt that he had. You know, he says, you know, if for what it's worth now, I finally know. And they basically like, it's too late for that shit, motherfucker. The damage has already been done. So forget about any remorse or any feeling bad. Just make sure you catch this copycat killer so that we all can kind of go home and, you know, go about our business. And again, this was a scene that was 5 years in the making, in essence, because of the history that McNulty had with these two particular bosses who, you know, have things on the line, who have their own personal interests as far as with this case being solved. And they're trying to figure out, you know, both Rawls and Daniels are trying to figure out their own next moves, so to speak. And we find out what those next moves are during the course of this episode. Great scene, great performances, especially from Dominic West, who plays McNulty. Levy and Perlman, again, a lot of history between these two characters have gone. You've seen them on opposite sides of the fence. Levy, of course, is with the drug dealers. And Perlman, of course, has been the ally of the cops and the major crimes unit and what have you. Basically, you know, you see them negotiate what type of jail time that Marlowe and his crew is going to get. Both of them know, like Levy knows that there was an illegal wiretap. But what Perlman has up her sleeve, the ace in the hole, was the fact that one of Levy had bribed one had an inside man that they were bribing, that they flipped, and he did not recognize that, and flipped on everybody, and that gives Perlman a kind of a, even though she basically had to concede that gives Perlman some wiggle room to negotiate, and to have Chris Partlow take all the murders, to have Marlowe walk, but not basically have to retire from the drug game. And she had a great line at the end of the scene. You know, both of you get to, the client gets to walk, or neither one of you get to walk at all, or the both of you don't walk at all. So Levy wanted Marlowe, everybody wanted Marlowe to walk, and also did not want a life sentence for Chris Partlow, but that was not the case. Perlman was able to have that ace in her hole, with Levy having one of his guys being flipped. Gary D. Pascal, of course, we saw that scene earlier with her and him and Freeman telling him, "You're done." That was he was the leak for Levy. He was the leak. He used to get the information from Pop Joe, in terms of the drug dealers having a connection. So, great scene. Seeing those two again. These two have been going at it for the duration of the series, even going back to season 1. These two have been going at it, and this was a fun scene to watch as they kind of like this chess match between these two, who again are on opposite sides of the. Even though they're both officers of the court, they're from a moral standpoint, they were clearly on opposite sides of the law, so to speak. And Levy's face at the end of this was hilarious too, because he knew that she had somewhat got the upper hand, and did not want to concede he had to give up more than what he wanted to. He thought that he had an advantage that he ended up having. And Perlman basically says, "Hey, if we got like a couple cops, if Marlowe comes out of retirement, we got like a couple cops up, then so be it. We will take this case off the docket, and we will lock some cops up if Marlowe does not retire." So great scene by these two actors. And of course, it wasn't their final scene. Levy would have another scene with Marlowe as he gave him the news, but I believe that was Perlman's final scene of the episode. The McNulty wake. So a tradition started back in season 3. If you remember, when one of the cops died, they would take his body to this bar called Kavanaugh's, lay him out on a pool table, and it started with the late Robert Colesbury, who was of course a producer on the show and died unexpectedly. I think after between seasons 2 and 3. So they did that. We saw that in season 3, and then they did it again in season 4 with another character that we didn't know. So McNulty, of course, is forced to, in essence, retire from the police department. He puts it in his papers, and they do this whole eulogy. Of course, Jay Landsman, his sergeant, does this eulogy for him. 13 years, not enough of a pension, and goes through all McNulty's all the good, basically went through the good, bad, and ugly of McNulty's career, and ends it, of course, with saying that basically when he was good, he was the best that we had. So you see him play the song, and you see them, you see everybody show up, people from various parts of various seasons of the episode. Agent Fitzhugh who used to work with them back season 1 and 2, and the first couple seasons. You see a number of the characters that we've seen throughout the course of the duration of the show. Kind of give McNulty his flowers. It was a nice tribute to the character, and perfect way to send McNulty out. And perfect way to kind of send that character out. Not being a guy like McNulty just never was going to. Something was going to happen like this. Like, this guy was never going to be a 25 to 30-year cop. Like so it made, when you look back at it, it made perfect sense that a guy like McNulty, would go out like that, would do something like that, kind of like this road cop, this cop that didn't really want to follow. It was great at his job, but didn't want to follow his rules per se, follow the rules of policing to a point where he's listening to bosses, things like that. So when you really think about how McNulty went out, this kind of made sense in terms of how his character would go out. That this guy, somebody like this, could not be a lifelong cop, because he never was going to play by the book. He never was going to end up being a boss. He never was somebody who, McNulty kind of was a police disruptor, if you want to say that. Kind of did things his way in a sense, and so this was a perfect way for him to go out. I don't know why I have Levy and Perlman twice, but you can certainly disregard that. That, of course, is a typo. Cheese and Slim Charles. So when you think of the word, we talked about our themes of comeuppance, and of course, at that wake, Kima tells both McNulty and Freeman she was the one that basically, in essence, snitched on him. And again, that makes perfect sense to who she was. Remember, season 1, Kima, she could have fingered Weebay for her shooting her, but she said she only saw one of the shooters, and that was, of course, Little Man. And that, like, Kima is like the last. If there's a pure soul of morality in the show, Kima's it. Kima's not gonna, she is gonna stick with the, she was a rule. Somebody's gonna follow the rules. She's gonna be just a straight arrow cop and just do her job and keep it moving. She was not for any of the politics. She was not for any of the bullshit to make. She was not gonna do something just to make a case. Like we saw Lester, we saw McNulty. Funk was kind of like that as well. Like he wasn't going to go outside the lines just to make a case. But Kima represented that as well as any of the characters of the entire show. That she was not going to jump outside of her character for the sake of the job. And she told them straight up, like, it had to be done. I did it. It had to be done. So, and they actually, you actually look at their reaction. They actually respected that because they know that's who she was. And Lester offers her a drink. McNulty basically says, "Well, if it had to be done, you had to do it." So that was also a part of the end part of that scene of the McNulty wake. Cheese and Slim Charles. So the Connect has been sold by Marlo, or there's an offer that's on the table. Basically, all the drug dealers who have to scrape up basically $10 million. Cheese basically says, I'm in for 900. I can cover the rest of whatever they came up with. Cheese says, I got the rest of it. And basically they said, and Fat Face Rick basically says, hey, where you got that kind of money? They get into it, Fat Face Rick, and when Fat Face Rick calls out Marlo, Cheese pulls a gun on him, and Cheese goes into this whole soliloquy about the game and things of that nature, and then Slim Charles shoots him without, of course, shoots him in the back, in the side of the head, and basically says that was for Joe. And of course, Slim Charles had long put together, and everybody knew this, that Marlo had taken over the Connect and everybody knew that Marlo had killed Prop Joe with everybody else, but what only Slim Charles knew is that Joe had been betrayed by Cheese. Just a perfect way for this character to go out. This guy, let me tell you something. When you talk about a guy that was a piece of shit, so let's go back to season 4, right? Season 4, like late in season 4, maybe it might have been Final Grades, where previous episode, Omar stole the entire shipment, right? He stole the entire shipment. Prop Joe in that meeting with Marlo, Chris, and then the Connect, the Greeks, does not give up Cheese. He says, he's my sister's brother, my sister's son. I can't do it. So he protects, because that's what Marlo wanted to talk to. Because Marlo thought that this was a setup from the start. Marlo didn't trust it. He thought that this was an inside job, and he wanted to talk to the person that was in charge. He wanted to talk to the person that was making the drop, in essence. And that, of course, Cheese was the one that was on point from that standpoint. He doesn't give up Cheese at all. Like, he says, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. Cheese, earlier in this season, so, gets all pissed off because Prop Joe basically tells him to stay away from hungry man's territory. And you're not in the co-op from that standpoint. You're not, because he wasn't that big on the ladder. He gets all pissed off and then goes out there and gives up information to get Butchie to Butchie's bar for $50,000 and sells out and ends up selling out Prop Joe for Marlo to go kill his own. This how he sells out his own flesh and blood uncle, his own uncle, for Marlo Stansfield and for a higher position not only in the co-op, but if you remember, Cheese ends up running the West Side as far as being the point person for the drug drops, and what have you. So this guy had this coming from. This was rewarding to watch. There was not, like I said, there was not a guy who had it coming more. One of the great comeuppance in the history of the show, of somebody that just had it coming and got what they deserve. And you can go back to season 1 with Stinkum and they getting shot by Omar after they killed his boyfriend. But there hasn't been, or Officer Walker in season 4 getting paint thrown on him after all the litany of shit that he did over the course of just basically one season. It is all in terms of season 4. So this is one of the great comeuppances in the history of the show. Like, this dude was a piece of shit, and he had it coming. He absolutely had it coming. And no one there. I'm sure that there were no tears shed for the fact that when he was taken out by one Slim Charles. And Slim Charles was the perfect one to do this, because he was loyal to Prop Joe over the course of the seasons 4 and 5. MVP of this episode, it was kind of hard, because you could have gave the MVP. I mean, I could have gave probably David Simon the MVP this episode, or Clark Johnson. Clark Johnson directed this episode, and ironically, Clark Johnson directed the first and last episode. Of course, and if you remember, Clark Johnson played Gus Haynes, who had a major role in season 5. The MVP was McNulty. Dominic West was phenomenal in this entire episode. You could see throughout the course of this episode how terrified he was when he found out that he and Lester were caught. These scenes with him and Beatty, he's back in her good graces. They've seen the kind of mended things. He's playing, stepdad to her kids, and he's enjoying himself from that standpoint. When he calls out Templeton, that scene with him and Templeton, when he calls out Templeton for his bullshit, and he in essence calls himself out, says, "I'm a fucking joke too, but I knew why I did it. Fuck if I know why you did it." He was just prominent throughout the course of this entire episode, and I thought that again, I thought he delivered every scene that he was in. He delivered on. So he gets the MVP of this episode. The series started out with McNulty. The series ended with McNulty, which made perfect sense. So he's the MVP of this episode. As far as like the legacy of, so let me talk. I want to spend a couple minutes on season 5, for a second. And again, this was an episode where, we talk about comeuppance. There was one scene that I did not put. By the way, I'm okay. So before we get back to that, there was one scene that I wanted to talk about that I did not put. I meant to put on here. Marla and Cedric Daniels. So Marla and Cedric. So at this point, Marla has the information. Marla, at this point, Nerys is mayor, and she basically tells Cedric that, in order for you to stay commissioner, you're gonna have to cook the books. Like, you're gonna have to cook the books. That's in Cedric Daniels at this point of the show has seen enough. He has absolutely seen enough. Remember, Cedric Daniels over the course of this series had been the good, kind of like the straight arrow cop, played everything straight for the most part, followed the bosses, and it frankly had gotten him to the point where now he's commissioner. And he basically says, I cannot swallow any more lies. I can't do the stats game. The stats game destroyed the department. I'm not going to cook the books for Nerys. I'm not going to cook the books so that Nerys could become mayor and Clark Kelly could become governor. And Marla basically says they have enough on that they got there. So Marla basically shows him the file. Remember that file that we've been seeing since season 1 that he had on Cedric about the old days when he was taking money in the Eastern District. The file that, of course, the previous commissioner had. His name eludes me now. That previous commissioner had that threatened to use on him like a couple seasons ago. It was in season 1 actually. But said Daniels at this point has had enough. He's done. He's not going to lie anymore. He's not going to cook any more books. He basically says, if I do it now, then she's going to have me in her pocket, and I'm no good like working. I can't work under that type of condition. So he decides to quit. He of course becomes a lawyer. We see in the final montage, he has that Perlman becomes a judge, and she has to recluse herself because of their relationship. So Daniels, gets to a point where he gets everything he wants, and it turns out that he's only going to go so far with playing the game that he's willing to give it up, just from a morality standpoint, just in essence, he had a code, similar to Omar, that he had his own code that he was not willing to break for just the sake of playing the game. So this was a great scene with him and his ex-wife. He also mentions, look, if I go out, if I try to hurt them, then that could put Perlman in jeopardy in terms of her career. So he was looking out for her as well. So, this was a guy that, over the course of his career, over the course of the series, basically did everything by the book. He, only time he played the game was he played the game when they told him to play the game. So he followed, for the most part, the powers that be, but he got to when he got in a position to where he was one of the powers that when he became one of the powers to that be, that he was no longer willing to play that game. And again, he goes out in essence on his own terms and becomes a lawyer as we saw. So great scene. So I wanted to get that last scene in because I didn't have it up there on the list of a great scene. This was a tremendous scene between he and his ex-wife Marla Daniels. Getting into the history of, and again, over the course of this episode, we saw a lot of characters who tried to do the right thing and they paid for it. Alma, Gus got demoted, trying to do the right thing, calling out Scott Templeton, who was lying, of course, about the news story about the fake killer, serial killer, and Templeton gets rewarded with a Pulitzer at the end of the episode. So he gets rewarded for bullshit. They get demoted. They get demoted for telling the truth. You see, Cedric Daniels has to pay the price for trying for being, having a moral compass, a moral center. He, goes from police commissioner to lawyer. So there were a number of characters. There were some characters who got their comeuppance for being, for following morals and being, and being real and being honest. And that's what The Wire was, or that's what this series was. The series did not, it did not. Just because you did the right thing doesn't mean it was going to turn out well for you in this series. And that was one of the things that they showed in the series, how nuanced this entire series was. Getting to season 5, and kind of like looking back on season 5, I think season 5 gets a terrible rap. Okay, I think it gets a terrible rap. Season 5 was not a bad season. Matter of fact, if you look at Vulture, we talked about that list of the top 60 Wire episodes of all time. 3 of the top 10 episodes of all time are ranked. 3 of the top 10 episodes of all time ranked are in season 5. You have this episode that was ranked number 3. You have Late Editions, which was phenomenal. That was ranked number 5. And number 10 was Clarifications. That was, of course, the Omar Little Death episode. So they had 3 of the top 10 episodes, 4 of the top 24 episodes in terms of being ranked. It wasn't so much that season 5 was bad. It was just so much that it just wasn't as good as the previous 4 seasons. And season 5, remember, season 5 did not get a fair shake because they only had 10 episodes, comparisons to the other 4 seasons getting anywhere from 12 to 13. If season 5 gets a regular complement of episodes, we'd be arguing season 5 versus season 2, season 5 versus season 1. I don't think it was ever going to, you would be hard pressed to top season 3, top season 4, to top season 3. You'd be very hard. It was almost impossible to top those 2 seasons. Season 4 is, I think, the greatest season of television ever. And season 3 is you talk about the Avon, the Fall of the Barksdales. The season 3 is right there with season 4. You can debate season 3 and 4 if you want to. Some like season 3 even better than season 4. But also those 2 seasons stand alone. But season 5 was not a bad season. It was like, you look at the strong episodes, there were about five, not just dead. There were just 5 heavy. There were about 5 heavyweight episodes in this season. Even the episode that Pop Joe gets killed, that was a big time episode. The opening episode, More with Less, the opening season was a great episode. They had about 4 or 5 tremendous episodes over the course of this season. It ends, Clarifications, Late Editions in this episode. It ends. Those are 3 classic episodes. Season 5 was not a bad season, not even close to being a bad season. So I think that, to me, the thing that I think about over the course of the history of the show is, like, one of the things that to me hasn't aged well is the fact that people bang on season 5 as if it was a bad season. It was not. And I'm sure if I watched the entire season, I would feel just as strongly about season 5 not being. I would feel this way as well. But this episode as a whole, this episode was one of the best episodes in the history of the show. I can make a case for this episode being the second best. I can make a case for it being the best episode when you think about it, because it's hard enough to close out. Like, some of the toughest episodes in television are season finales, because in a season finale, you're wrapping up the story of a season, and you also have to kind of give breadcrumbs into next season. It is very difficult for a season finale. That's why a lot of times the best episodes in a show season will be the penultimate episode for the season finale. The second to last episode. A lot of times in these shows. For this to wrap up an entire series is a different monster. Like I said, I would put this series up. I would put this episode up with any series finale that I've ever seen. I think probably the best one I've seen. I think Boardwalk Empire probably has the best series finale I've ever seen. To be honest with you, the way that wrapped up, but it's right there with any series finale that you will ever see. Right there with the Sopranos, right there with Boardwalk Empire, right there with any series finale. The Shield had a great one too. That if you go watch The Shield, if you're a fan of The Shield, that season series finale was spectacular as well. But I would put it up there with any series finale in the last 30 years without questioning this, and this definitely in the golden age of television. Again, I don't go back as far as like MASH, MASH. I did see the series finale of Dallas, and it was terrible. The series finale of Dallas, and I'm not even talking about the TNT Dallas. Who cares about that? I'm talking about when Dallas went off CBS. That was not that wasn't it wasn't good at all. I remember that as a kid. It just wasn't. I wasn't really feeling that. But in the last 30 years, this series finale was as good as any series finale that we've ever seen. And to me, again, nothing's changed. Nothing has changed about this show that, in terms of my opinion, of this being the greatest show in the history of television. Like nothing's changed from that standpoint. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast. I will see you next time. I will see you later on this week as we look at some NFL action. And again, not too far. It's October now, so the NBA is right around the corner. We'll be here in a couple of weeks. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great upcoming week. So long.